I'm back. So you should have engaged in your do now activity. You should have been able to watch that video and then answer those questions. See, I was very straightforward this time. There was no quick write, nothing for you to actually think on your own about, just pretty much understanding the information that you were receiving. Okay. And I'm going to tell you in just a few why that information was relevant. I mean, first of all, if you use your context clues, something you may have already heard, especially in middle school, that the name of the story is When I Was Puerto Rican. So it's important to know where is Puerto Rico, what is Puerto Rico, so how can you be a Puerto Rican? And you guys may, of course, you may know that because you're ninth graders. You cool, you got a little swag, so you may know you may be Puerto Rican. So of course I know what a Puerto Rican is. But there are some people who may not know. So we just want to make sure that I want to make sure you guys have some background knowledge as we move forward in the story. All right. So key points, things that you make sure that you have your handout out, just like I have it right here. Try to get this in together. Okay. Okay. Our first key point, number one, text to world connection. Now remember, our key point notes is listed on the very top of our handout. First thing you want to do is write your name. It's like, why am I writing my name? Because my name, you're going to see who is it from. Because I want you to continue to keep the practice of writing your name on things, because I don't want you to come back to school and then not put your name on it. Then I can't give you credit for it. So you're going to write your name at the top, and we're going to key point notes is where we are. Okay? Text to world connection. So we've already found that the text to self connection is the connection between the text and your own personal life experiences. You ask the questions like, how do I relate to the text? What does it remind me of? What kind of personal experience the text remind me of? We already understand text to text connection. Text to text connection is it pretty much a connection between a text, a story, and another story, a text and another text. What does this story remind me of? What other story does this story remind me of? Text to text connection. We talked about in our live session on yesterday, when we talk about text to text connection, we've used the analogy of using text messages. So if you have one individual who has a text who texts you, and then you have another individual who sends a similar text, you can make a connection based on the background knowledge you receive from the other text. It's the same thing. It translates to English. It translates to reading the same way. Okay? So, definition for text to world connection. Text to world connection is the connection between the story and the events in the real world. Simply put. So what you're going to do, you're going to come on over here to your notes section of your handout, and you're just going to put a connection between the story and the real world. Exactly what you see on the screen is exactly what you're going to put. As you read through stories, it is important to ask yourself, we need to ask ourselves, what event from the past and present does this story remind me of? What event from the past and the present does this story remind me of? That's how we make text to world connections. And over here in our notes section, we're going to put the bolded, capitalized words right into the blanks. Okay? That is all we need to do for our notes. Like, why do we write it if you already have it there? Because typically when you write things or type things, you're making the connection with it, and you tend to remember it a lot better. Okay? So that's our key point number 1 for today is text to world connection. The next thing we're going to talk about is the historical context. Okay, we're reading this story about when I was Puerto Rican. How can we connect this to the text? How can we make the text the world connection? How can we connect the text to the world? So that's why we're going to give some background knowledge of who Puerto Rico is, what it is, what country it is, and why it's relevant, so that we can make that connection with the text. Okay? So on your notes section, historical context, make sure that you follow along, because this is information. We're going to input it right in the blanks. Okay? Today, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. And so what is a territory? That means that the United States has promised to protect Puerto Rico, and it has made that promise to Puerto Rico since 1917. After the states were ratified, they decided that they was no longer going to accept states, that they will accept territories. So Puerto Rico came after states were ratified, and then that's the reason why Puerto Rico could not become a state. That's a little bit of a history lesson, U.S. history lesson. You may have heard that before in U.S. history. If not, you just learned something new. But Puerto Rico the important thing is to understand that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. So we're going to come over here and put Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. Okay? Oh, that's not a period. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. That's the most important thing for that line. And then it says this means that the United, even if you can put U.S. I'm going to put U.S. I'm going to abbreviate it because it's right there. The U.S. has promised. It's important to understand that it's a promise. Promise. What is he? To protect Puerto Rico since 1917. Okay? Now, not everybody was in agreement with making Puerto Rico a territory on both ends. There was Americans who were like, nope, we don't need any additional people to take care of. And then there was Puerto Rico like, we don't need y'all help, pretty much. So when you are having these type of agreements in politics and policies and stuff like that, when you get tension, there becomes tension in the room. And then you have Americans who don't like Puerto Ricans and Puerto Ricans who don't like America, vice versa, And so because in 1917, the most prominent individuals in that time, let's say prominent and put air quotations in, because, Black people were still here, but more often than not, it was white Americans who were not in agreement with Puerto Rico becoming a territory, and then you have Puerto Ricans who don't want white America's help, because primarily in that time it was really white America. Whatever the case may be, right here, the important things to understand is that not everyone agreed with making Puerto Rico a territory, and which can cause tension. Tension mean friction. Tension mean when you're pulling on something and it doesn't want to go. Everybody's not in the same. They don't like each other. That's the type of tension we're talking about here when we're talking about it. Tension in this contest. So not everyone agreed. That goes in that blank. Oh, looks like I already have it here. We'll just add it. Now everyone agreed with making Puerto Rico a territory which can cause tension. Like, why is that important? If you think about Esmeralda, we know that she doesn't like the fact that she moved. We already know that from what we've already read. Why? Think about that as we are going over these notes. In 1953, the largest migration of Puerto Ricans came to the United States. Okay, so 1917, Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory. If you did your due now, you know that Puerto Rico is a very small country. We know that it is about the size of Connecticut. And we also know that because it's a U.S. territory, we don't need a passport to go over there. Just like Americans don't need a passport to go to Puerto Rico, Puerto Ricans don't need a passport to come to America because they are essentially Americans. They're Puerto Rican American. Whether they claim that or not, it's you don't have to claim it, but that is essentially what us or America saying I'm going to protect you, making Puerto Rico a part of America. Okay? So we know that Puerto Rico was supposedly protected since 1917. Now, okay, it's at least 40 years later, a little more than 40 years later, you have the Puerto Ricans migrating to the United States. Doesn't mean it didn't start sooner. Just mean that that's when a lot of Puerto Ricans decided, I want to go to America. They say they want to, they gonna help us, let them help us. That's in my mindset. That's what I'm thinking. Let's go to America where we are protected. Okay. So in the spot in the blank here in 1953, the largest migration of Puerto Ricans came to the United States. This is relevant to the story because the story was written in 1994, but we already know from the text evidence on yesterday, or the text features, I'm sorry, that Esmeralda Santiago wrote this as a memoir. These are her memories. This is what she experienced at the age of 14. So, based on her real life experiences, right? Right. So, that time frame that she was writing about was between the 1950s and the 1960s. When did the largest migration of Puerto Ricans come to America? 1953. Is it clicking yet? Text to world connection. This is a 1950s, 1960s that Esmeralda is talking about the time in her life where she moved to America. Maybe Esmeralda Santiago is a part of the Great Migration or the largest migration. And I want you guys to see what that actually looks like because I thought it was very interesting to understand how far Puerto Ricans migrated to come into America. So we're going to take a field trip, and we're actually going to be astronauts, and we're going to explore with Google Earth. And it's really a cool tool, especially because and some of you guys, it's about me. You like to look at the stars, and some of you want to be astronomers. This is a really, really, really good tool to have and to explore. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. And it's taking a good little minute to load, but I promise you that it's worth it. We're going to go to the search bar here. We're going to put Puerto Rico, and we're going to whoosh, travel around the world for a second, and bam, we're in Puerto Rico. and you didn't need a passport. You're welcome. So this is Puerto Rico. We know from the fantastic facts that this is about as big as Connecticut, right? And then if you look at where America is, in fact, let's go to where we are. How about that? It's taking this little time. We're zooming out, we're zooming out, we're zooming out. Zoom, 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 zoom. As you can see, it says territory here. It's a Caribbean island that is a U.S. territory. Okay? That's Puerto Rico. These are some more islands. See Cuba. See the Cayman Islands. See Turks and Caicos. See the Dominican Republic. And the United States is way over here. It looks not that far from this map, but that is a stretch of water to go through. All right, it's letting me out a little bit. And you see Texas is over here, and you see Puerto Rico way over there. We know in the story Esmeralda actually went to Brooklyn. We know Brooklyn is in New York. So that means she traveled from Puerto Rico to way over here to New York, part of the Great Migration, right? So that's just to give you a little idea of how far the people traveled to get to America during the largest migration of Puerto Ricans. Esmeralda Santiago seemingly is a part of one of those individuals who migrated during that time. Okay? All right. So the idea is to keep these things in mind as we continue to read When I Was Puerto Rican. We're going to go over the criteria for success, and then we're going to get to reading. Okay? Criteria for success. Again, what we need to do in order to complete this assignment and to be successful in this work right now. Okay? The same information, again, is on your handout. It's on your handout right here. But for the sake of this presentation, again, we're going to view it on the slide. Criteria for success, annotations. Annotations is pretty much marking up the text so that we can help us comprehend or understand what we're getting ready to read. Just like we did yesterday, we're going to underline those nouns. We're going to underline the names of people, places, and things. That helps us build background knowledge on the who, what, when, where of what's going on within the text. We're going to highlight the details in yellow. Those are the details that stand out to us and help us make connections. What connections? Text to self connections, text to text connections, and now text to world connections. We're going to write a 10-word gist. I'm emphasizing 10-word gist, not 2 words, not 3 words, a 10-word gist or summary. We're going to summarize each chunk. What is a chunk? A chunk is, looking at our handout here, I'm going to enlarge it because I want to make sure you guys understand with complete certainty. You're going to, each chunk, this says 26 to 26 to 23. I apologize about that. This says 26 to 29. It is a complete paragraph or section of the text. And so what you're going to do is annotate, and I'm going to show you guys. We're going to walk you through it like I did yesterday. We're going to write a 10-word summary of what this section is talking about. So you have to do that for this one section. Then when you get to 30-31, that's another chunk. This section, 10-word summary, 10-word gist of what's going on in that section. 32-33, 10-word gist. 34-35, 10-word gist. 36-38, 10-word gist. 39-48, 10-word gist. Each and every section requires that you write a 10-word summary or gist of what's going on in that section of the text. The reason why it's broken down in some areas is more words than others is because even though the information may be small, it may be something very, very important for you to understand in the story in order for you to comprehend the story completely. Okay? So think about that as we move forward. Okay? 10-word gist. Now, you may or may not use every annotation style, because underlining and highlighting, those are our annotation tools. When we underline something, we are annotating it. When we highlight something in our story, in our books, on our paper, we're annotating it. So underlining and highlighting it is an annotation. Okay? When you write down things in the margin, our 10-word gist, that is also called a annotation. When you write in the margin, text to self, text to world, text to text, that is also a type of annotation. So the idea is that the criteria for success is for us to annotate the story. So all of these tools that we're using in order to understand the text, they are our annotation tools. Okay? And then when you get to the guiding questions, make sure that you answer in one complete sentence. Now, a complete sentence, and you guys remember this, don't act like you forgot. I know, Rihanna, I channeled her for a second, is a capital starts the beginning of that sentence and a punctuation mark is at the end. Whether it's some type of punctuation is either a question, a exclamation mark, a period, or yeah, those are pretty much the main ones that you use for ending your sentence. So if there is no punctuation mark, I don't know that you ended your thought. So make sure that you answer in a complete sentence when you answer the guiding questions. All right. So without further ado, let's read.